Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, the fascinating and maybe a little spooky world surrounding the Queen Mary. You know, that huge old ocean liner. It's now a permanent fixture down in Long Beach, California, a hotel, basically, but it pulls in curious people from everywhere.
That's right. And we've gathered some really compelling stuff for you today. This deep dive is going to explore those firsthand accounts, the alleged ghostly happenings on board.
Right.
And we'll also look at the ship's incredible history. And maybe the most interesting part, we'll dig into this really unique scientific investigation that actually happened on the Queen Mary, looking into these phenomena.
Exactly. So our mission today is to kind of navigate through the most captivating ghost tales and really get into the nitty-gritty of that official investigation.
Yeah.
We want to help you understand why the Queen Mary has this incredibly strong and lasting reputation as, well, a place where things go bump in the night. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the ship itself, it's not just any old ship, is it?
Oh, certainly not. The Queen Mary has incredibly rich history. And that undoubtedly adds to the atmosphere, and feeds the stories that have popped up over the years. She was launched back in 1934, conceived as this super luxurious ocean liner, like a floating palace, some people called her. Her maiden voyage was 36.
Wow.
And for a short, glorious time, she was really the absolute peak of transatlantic travel.
But then, well, global events kind of got in the way.
They did indeed. World War II starts, and the Queen Mary goes through this dramatic change. They stripped out all the fancy stuff, painted her this dull gray for camouflage, and she became a troop transport. That's when she got that eerie nickname, the Gray Ghost.
Yeah.
Apparently her speed was incredible. It helped her dodge German U-boats.
And her wartime service wasn't all smooth sailing, right? There was that really awful collision.
Yes, 1942. Crossing the North Atlantic, she collided with a smaller British cruiser, the HMS Curacoa. Tragically, over 300 lives were lost. The Queen Mary basically just sliced the Curacoa in half.
Oh my.
And because of wartime rules, orders to keep going, the Queen Mary couldn't even stop to help like she normally would have. It's a really, really somber part of her history.
You can just imagine the residual energy, maybe, the sheer emotional weight left behind after something like that.
Precisely. After the war, she was refitted, went back to being a passenger liner in 47, did over 1,000 transatlantic trips, carried all sorts of famous people, movie stars, musicians, royalty even. But, the golden age of ocean liners started fading as air travel took off. So in 1967, she made her final voyage and was permanently docked in Long Beach.
So it's got this whole lifespan packed in. Luxury, war, then becoming this, static landmark.
Exactly. That's a lot of history contained within one hull.
It really does give you the feeling of a place just humming with echoes from the past, even just reading about it. Okay, so that's crucial background. Now, let's get into those whispers in the halls, the ghostly stuff people have actually reported over the decades. Where do some of the most common stories come from?
Well, one of the most famous spots is the first-class swimming pool. Lots of stories there, but the big one is about a young girl named Jackie, supposedly drowned there.
Oh, wow.
People claim they hear like a child's giggling, sometimes followed by these distressed cries for help, echoing around the empty pool area.
Oof, that's unsettling. A kid crying. Yeah, that would stick with you.
It would. And there's also this recurring story of a woman in, a vintage swimsuit seen near the pool.
Really?
Yeah, often described as having this sort of luminous quality, almost see-through. And then she just vanishes, sometimes leaves behind a sudden cold spot or even a faint smell of lavender.
Lavender. That's specific. Like a sensory echo or something?
It's interesting how many stories mention smells or temperature changes, isn't it? Maybe it's how our brains try to process something weird, grounding it in sensations we recognize.
Yeah, maybe. What about, down in the guts of the ship? The boiler room comes up a lot, right?
Yes. The boiler room has its own resident ghost, believed to be a young worker, John Batter. He died tragically during a drill, crushed by a heavy hatch door.
Oh, terrible.
People describe catching these fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure moving around the machinery. Sometimes just like a quick impression of a face looking out. The vibe down there is often described as heavy, oppressive, sudden temperature drops too.
That makes a grim kind of sense. A terrible accident in that hot, noisy place. You can see how that might leave a strong imprint.
And what about just general feelings, not tied to specific accidents?
In the old third-class area, especially near where the infirmary used to be, There are loads of reports of faint whispers, voices you can't quite make out. And there's this commonly reported just pervasive feeling of deep sadness in that part of the ship. Like the emotions of people who suffered there are still hanging around somehow.
That heavy atmosphere. Like the ship itself is holding on to those past feelings. What about the fancier spots? The Grand Ballroom. Must be stories there too. Absolutely. The Grand Ballroom's another hot spot. Apparitions of dancing guests dressed in, old-fashioned clothes seen gliding across the floor, especially late at night.
Wow.
Witnesses often say they look kind of shimmery, and then they just vanish if you get close. And maybe even spookier, some people report hearing faint, ghostly music, like big band-era stuff, echoing in the empty ballroom.
That's incredibly evocative. Phantom dancers, faint music, like a memory just playing out. And the children's playroom we heard about. That sounds particularly creepy.
The children's playroom, has several recurring tales.
Yeah.
One involves seeing a ghostly child, often described clutching a doll.
Oh, unsettling.
There are also accounts of the playroom door opening and closing by itself. And again, that weird scent of lavender sometimes pops up there too.
Lavender again?
Yeah. One really vivid story is about a couple on their honeymoon drawn to the playroom by what sounded like a child crying. They saw this, glowing girl holding a doll before she just faded away.
Genuinely eerie. And it's not just tourists, right? Even people who work there maybe started out skeptical. They've had experiences too.
That's right. There's a pretty compelling story about a worker down in the lower decks. Considered himself quite grounded, apparently. He was fixing pipes, felt this sudden, intense coldness.
Oh.
And then saw an elderly man in what he recognized as old-style sailor gear walk straight through a solid wall at the end of the corridor.
No kidding. Walked through a wall. That would definitely make you question things.
I'd say so. It forces you to reconsider what you think is possible, Yeah. And then, of course, there's cabin B340. That place seems to have a serious reputation.
Ah, yes. B340. Notorious is the word, I think. It has this long history of reported paranormal stuff. Guests who've actually stayed there have described all sorts of things.
Like what?
Like feeling unseen hands pulling at their sheets, hearing disembodied whispers, seeing shadowy figures in the room.
Creepy.
Sudden drastic drops in temperature are reported, too. Strange noises, and even a ghostly voice apparently telling people to get out.
Get out. Wow. Pretty direct.
It's become so famous that people specifically ask for it, hoping for an intense experience.
Right. It sounds like the Queen Mary has this whole spectral cast, each haunting their own little corner. But there's one figure who seems to get the most attention, the enigmatic Lady in White.
Yes, the Lady in White.
Yeah.
She's definitely a central character in the Queen Mary's ghost lore, usually described as this radiant woman in a flowing white dress, often seen gliding along the grand staircase, that big, elegant staircase. A key detail people mention is long, dark hair that hides her face, adding to this feeling of sadness and mystery around her.
And there are specific stories about her appearances, yeah.
There are. The one about the college group who were there on a dare is pretty striking. They thought it was all nonsense, apparently.
Right.
But then they felt this sudden cold spot in a dim hallway, and the Lady in White just sort of materialized, drifted towards them. They said she reached out, gently touched one of them on the shoulder, then vanished, and left behind only the distinct smell of old roses. It's interesting, isn't it, how many cultures have legends about white figures linked to loss. Maybe there's something universal about that archetype that makes her so prominent here.
That sensory detail, again, the roses, it definitely adds a layer of, perceived realness to an already weird experience.
It does. There's another really poignant one about a widower visiting the ship on the anniversary of his wife's death.
Oh, wow.
He was sitting quietly in the ballroom, saw the Lady in White near the grand piano, described her fingers moving silently over the keys, and the tune she seemed to be playing was his late wife's favorite song.
Goodness.
He felt it was like a sign, a moment of comfort from beyond. It's fascinating how these experiences often have real emotional weight for the witnesses. Does that suggest something about what these phenomena are, maybe connected to emotional energy or memory?
Wow, that's really touching. Still spectral, but touching. So what are the main ideas about who this Lady in White might have been?
There are a few theories floating around. Some think she was a young bride who died tragically on the ship, maybe even on her wedding day.
How sad.
Others guess she might have been an actress or a singer who met a bad end while traveling on the Queen Mary. Whatever the specifics, there's this consistent feeling of deep loss and sorrow connected to her. Like she embodies this lingering heartbreak.
It's fascinating how these individual stories and that enduring image of the Lady in White have really cemented the Queen Mary's haunted reputation.
Yeah.
Okay, moving past the anecdotes. There was that official scientific investigation you mentioned. That sounds like a truly different way to look at all this.
It was pretty unprecedented, yeah. Early 1990s, the company managing the Queen Mary back then actually commissioned Christopher Chacon. He's a highly respected parapsychologist, someone who scientifically studies alleged psychic stuff.
Right.
And an anomalist, meaning he investigates things outside normal science. They asked him to do a full-on scientific investigation into all the reported phenomena.
And this wasn't just like ghost hunters with EMF meters.
No, this was rigorous. 18 months, 204/7.
18 months, around the clock.
Yep.
That's a serious commitment of time and resources.
Mm.
What sort of methods did Chacon and his team actually use?
They had an impressive amount of advanced tech. They were meticulously monitoring everything: background radiation, air pressure changes, magnetic field anomalies, even the chemical makeup of the air.
Wow.
They put together this team of scientists from different fields: physicists, medical doctors, chemists, all focused on collecting and analyzing data from every part of the ship systematically. Plus, they did over 1,500 detailed interviews with people who reported weird experiences and ran hundreds of controlled experiments. Chacon really emphasized strict scientific controls, making sure the data was solid, repeating things multiple times to minimize errors.
Sounds incredibly thorough. And you mentioned Chacon focused on ruling out logical, non-paranormal explanations first.
Right.
What kind of things did they try to account for?
Yeah, he stressed how critical it was to consider and eliminate psychological factors like the power of suggestion or how expectations can influence what you perceive.
Makes sense.
They also looked into physiological factors, environmental conditions, drafts, temperature changes, and any possible circumstantial reasons for odd occurrences. His whole method was based on trying to debunk the claims with natural causes before even thinking about a paranormal explanation.
Okay, so after all that incredibly extensive data gathering and rigorous analysis, what did they actually conclude?
In total, they documented an amazing number, over 12,000 distinct events.
12,000.
Yeah. Now, about 60% of those they could confidently explain through conventional, normal factors.
Okay, so the majority were explainable.
Right. But that still left a little over 30% of the events that Chacon classified as anomalous, meaning phenomena they couldn't readily explain using psychology, physiology, environment, or circumstances.
30% unexplained.
Yeah.
That's still a lot.
It is. In his final parapsychological assessment, Chacon concluded that the data suggest phenomena with fluctuating composite characteristics, basically saying there were different types of unexplained things happening. Given that such a big chunk remained unexplained, did Chacon or anyone else have theories about why those specific events defied explanation while others didn't?
So, even under scientific scrutiny, a significant portion of the reported activity stayed unexplained. That's pretty compelling. And Chacon also came up with a way to categorize the different kinds of haunt phenomena they observed, didn't he?
Yes, based on his findings and existing parapsychological theories, Chacon suggested several basic categories to help understand these reported hauntings. He talked about the residual haunt. He likened it to an imprint or recording left on the environment.
Like a tape loop.
Exactly. A non-conscious replay of past events, like a videotape on a loop, producing sights and sounds, but with no actual awareness involved.
So just echoes of the past repeating.
Yeah.
No interaction or consciousness.
Precisely. Then he contrasted that with a sentient haunt. This is theorized to have some degree of consciousness, feeling, perception, maybe even memory.
Okay.
These kinds of hauntings might show reactive behavior, respond to things, maybe even be capable of some kind of communication.
That sounds much more like the classic idea of a ghost, something with awareness or intention.
Exactly. And those are often the ones that generate more fear and more intrigue because they're unpredictable. Chacon also distinguished between objective haunts, where the phenomena physically happen in the environment, separate from anyone experiencing them.
So potentially recordable?
Right, maybe captured by cameras or audio recorders. And then subjective haunts, which are experienced purely in the mind of certain individuals, leaving no physical trace behind.
So like a disembodied voice on a recorder would be objective, but a feeling of being watched that only one person feels is subjective.
That's a clear way to put it. And as I recall, Chacon suggested that real hauntings are rarely just one of these things. They're usually a complex mix. He specifically mentioned the Queen Mary as a place where you see this intricate combination of different types of phenomena.
That's right. He felt the sheer variety of experiences reported on the Queen Mary supported this multifaceted view of hauntings. Now, thinking about why these stories just keep gripping us, why we find them so compelling, what are some of the basic psychological things going on there?
Well, there are several mechanisms of fear that feed into the power of these stories. The most basic is just our built-in fight or flight response. Even just the suggestion of a potential threat, something unknown, maybe dangerous, can trigger those primal physical reactions, the chill, the racing heart, the senses going on high alert.
Precisely. And our brains are also just naturally fascinated by things that are new or unusual. Ghost stories, by definition, are outside our normal experience, so they stick in our minds more. And the physical presence of the Queen Mary itself massively amplifies this. Actually being inside this huge history-soaked ship, touching the walls, breathing the air, it gives the stories a tangible reality that just reading about some random haunted house can't match.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the whole atmosphere, the setting itself, playing a huge role in making the tales feel more believable, more immersive.
Totally. Plus, just sharing scary stories is a really common social thing, right? It can build community, create shared experiences. It's often a way for us to explore our fears in a relatively safe space.
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, a lot of these ghost stories, especially the Queen Mary ones, tap into really deep human emotions, love, loss, the idea of unfinished business. These are universal themes that resonate with our own lives and longings, making the stories feel more meaningful, more relatable.
They really do connect with something fundamental in us, our curiosity about what happens after death, our connection to the past. So considering all that, why do you think people are still so drawn to haunted tales and places like the Queen Mary? What's the lasting appeal?
I think it's a mix of things. There's definitely the thrill of the unknown, that almost irresistible pull to maybe catch a glimpse of something beyond our everyday reality.
Yeah.
For some people, there's a genuine hope of making contact, finding actual proof of life after death. And for lots of others, it's just a really engaging way to spark the imagination and dive into a cool mystery. The questions around the Queen Mary just keep lingering. Are there more secrets, more spirits still there? What is the real nature of these hauntings? Tricks of the mind? Or real glimpses into another world that keeps the mystery alive and interesting?
And the Queen Mary itself has really leaned into this part of its identity in recent years, hasn't it?
Oh, definitely. They now offer all sorts of haunted tours. They even have a specific haunted stateroom you can book.
Yeah.
They're fully embracing that side of the ship's history and legend.
Yeah.
Around Halloween, it becomes this massive haunted attraction. They clearly know it's a huge draw for the public.
It's almost like the ship itself has become a living monument to these stories, with every new account just adding another layer to its spooky mystique. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the main things we've covered today?
Well, we took a pretty fascinating trip through the Queen Mary's long and sometimes tragic history, from luxury liner to wartime service to her final spot in Long Beach. We recounted some of the most compelling first-hand stories of alleged paranormal activity all over the ship, from Jackie in the pool to the mournful Lady in White and those unsettling experiences in cabin B340.
And we looked at that really groundbreaking scientific investigation by Christopher Chacon, highlighting his careful methods and the significant number of events that ended up defying scientific explanation.
Exactly. We also touched on Chacon's categories for haunt phenomena: residual, sentient, objective, subjective, and talked about some of the underlying psychological reasons why these gripping tales of the haunted Queen Mary still hold such sway over our imaginations.
It really does seem like the Queen Mary acts as this amazing kind of bridge, doesn't it, between what we know and what remains unexplained. It perfectly mirrors our ongoing fascination with the supernatural.
Yeah, it really does. So for you, our listener, here's maybe a final thought to chew on. What does it truly mean to experience a place with such a powerful, persistent, haunted reputation? Is it mostly about connecting with history, or does it involve actually confronting the possibility of something more, something that maybe lies beyond our current scientific grasp? We encourage you to think about your own beliefs and perspectives on this whole enduring mystery. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.